Allow me to introduce myself. Name C. I'm kind of the leader around here in Great. These are my very good friends A, B, and C. They're very brainy. It's like they got two brains instead of hands. I'm made of rocks, as you can see, but don't let that intimidate you unless you're made of scissors. That's a rock, scissors, paper job for you. All right. You know, I tried to start a revolution, but didn't print enough pamphlets, so hardly anyone showed up except for Juan and his girlfriend, who are great. As a punishment, I was sent to Singapore to make a speech at ASUS, a bit of a promotional disaster, that one. But now I'm trying to start another revolution, if you'd be interested. Do I reckon you'd be interested? Yes? All right. The supply chain revolution. All right. So one day I was sitting in my office in Bucharest working we're on Thor Ragnarok, not watching it. But in case you're wondering what that was about, it's from Thor Ragnarok. So across from me is my colleague Dan, and as I'm very busy watching the movie, Dan's phone is making like this annoying sounds, like bzz, 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 bzz. And I'm like, hey Dan, and he's like, nothing. Hey Dan, nothing. Like, hey Dan, and he says, yeah, what? What's up with your phone? And he's like, yeah, it's like Reddit. And I'm like, what's Reddit? He's like, you know, it's like Twitter, but it's red. Oh, okay, so what's up with this Reddit? So we look there, and we see like different people. And he said, like, yeah, this is for young people like me, not for like people like you. Oh, all right. So what's on Reddit? So we look there, there's like one guy posted on this red Twitter thingy, like a new critical update available for your computer. All right, and the only thing is that he says it's kind of strange. It tries to make a mystery update, but there's basically nothing in there. And then immediately, you know, people start sharing their opinions, and one guy says, hey, yeah, me too, I had the same error on my computer. And another guy says, yes, and I uploaded the virus total, and guess what? It has 0 detections, so probably it's fine. And then another guy says, but still it's suspicious because it's called ASUS Force Updater. And then another guy, that's probably because ASUS is a German company. The wisdom of the red Twitter. Everybody knows, general knowledge, ASUS is a German company. All right, then another guy, same place, posts another message. I purchased the motherboard, you know, and this ASUS Live update gives me a very hard time because it can be tricked to download pretty much everything from the internet. And immediately somebody from ASUS USA replies and says, well, we're terribly sorry for that. Have you tried running a scan for viruses? And obviously people have tried running a scan for viruses, yes, sure, but nothing was found. So this gets you, wondering, this was about 9 months ago, right, and then 7 months ago, and you get to start thinking, what about if this is a supply chain attack, or if this was a supply chain attack, right? Speaking of supply chain attacks, how many people remember this Shadowpad story? Okay, a few of you. This was a very funny one as well. A very, let's say, important player, a financial institution, called us one day saying that they found some suspicious traffic in their network, and hey, can you guys please come over and take a look at this? So we went there, we found what was going on. It turned out that software from NetSerang, which is a Korean company, was Trojanized with a very tricky thingy. And Microsoft recently posted, there's this indictment, a court order, in which they say that an APT known as Barium was responsible for that, and that involves this Shadowpad malware. And by the way, what's up with this Barium, guys? John Lambert, one of my favorite speakers at SAS, unfortunately he's not here this year, But he presented about barium at Virus Bulletin, and he said that barium was the APT behind the Shadowpad and the CCleaner attacks. So what's up with all this barium talk, right? Well, in January 2017, Microsoft posted a blog in which they talk about barium and lead, which are these two known activity groups that use the WinNTI malware. So when you see the WinNTI malware, that's kind of an old friend for us, right? We began looking into WinNTI in 2011, and we kept tracking that. And our conclusion back in 2011 was that this was a hacking group of Chinese origins. And there were like a lot of, trails going into that. For instance, on one of these hacker forums, somebody posted a message from Southland Sword, saying that he's hiring people with a lot of unique skills, penetration testing, they know how to do things, skill things, and they need good verbal and written language skills. They should be able to work in a team. There's money involved, like very nice job. And the best part, we have powerful background, no comments. Yeah, don't worry. No need to ask any questions, we are powerful. And then one of the WinNTI guys, Merchanzi, basically he posts a reply to that message, and he said, hey, but aren't you recruiting people for APT? What's up with all this, pen testing? Let's be honest here. You want people for APT work, right? And he said, well, Guangzhou is too far, but anyway, sounds like a good plan. And it's kind of ironic that Merchanzi was later indicted in 2017 for hacking the Capstone turbine and a few other companies. Well, we told you so in 2011. So anyways, if you want to learn more about all these combinations, and what if those Reddit things were actually a supply chain attack? Let me invite my very brainy colleague, Boris, to tell you about a very curious discovery we made in January 2019. Boris?
Thank you, Mr. Costin. So, in January this year, we found something very strange. We found that our technology caught a file, but there was some problem with this file. It had a valid signature of big hardware manufacturer, ASUS. So at first we thought that it should be a false alarm and decided to investigate. We found out that we found samples that were distributed from official servers of ASUS and had a very tricky backdoor with valid digital signature. All samples that we found were backdoored using one of two backdooring techniques, and all of them were backdooring the same portable executable. So we managed to find this original file, and you can see it on this slide. You can see that it contains timestamp of March 2015. And why attackers choose such an old file to carry an infection? We believe that attackers found it along with sign-in keys. On this slide, you can see side-by-side comparison of two techniques that were used to backdoor this sample. And also you can see side-by-side comparison of patched file layouts. In both cases, payload is located in the resource section, but the way how it was executed changed all the time. On this slide, you can see first technique that was used among early variants. With this technique, winMine function was replaced with another function that copies payload from the resource section using a fixed size and offset. And then it executed with another fixed size, with another offset. So why does it work? Even if this payload is a valid portable executable, it contains a function that is coded in position-independent way. And what is also interesting about this sample is that you can see that it contains a reference to PDB path, and it reveals the name of this project. Name of this project is ASUS code, which means that it was developed especially for carrying this attack. Attackers decided to switch to more stealthy technique, and here you can see that this time winMine function is left intact, but backdoor located deep inside of C library functions, and it's executed right prior to termination of application. The loader code changed as well, and the payload is still located in the resource section, but encryption is added. And you can see decryption algorithm on the left side of this slide. You can see that it's a custom XOR-based algorithm, but what is quite interesting about this algorithm? It's a quite famous algorithm that was used in PlugX malware. And PlugX malware is quite popular among Chinese hacking groups. And while this doesn't indicate strong connection between PlugX authors and actors behind this attack, we believe that actors behind this attack, they are quite familiar with source code of PlugX, and maybe they used it in attacks in the past. So right now, let's talk about shellcode. And we found a lot of them. And some of them were really big in size because of the amount of data that assembled on the stack. So why this data is present and how it's used? It would appear that the main goal factors behind this sophisticated attack was to remain undetected in the blind side of hundreds of thousands of installations while targeting only specific computers with surgical precision. And to achieve that, shellcode contains a table of entries where each entry contains 1 or 2 MD5 hashes of target's MAC addresses. And Backdoor will download next stage only in case if the network addresses of computer will match one of these entries. And otherwise, no malicious activity will be performed. So we identified 230 unique samples, and we were able to extract 40 unique hash tables out of them. So we found out that smallest table, which also is the oldest one, contains only 8 entries, and the biggest one contains 307 entries. So in total, we found 205 entries of type 1 and 209 entries of type 2. So it's fair to say that there are more than 400 machines that were targeted by Operation ShadowHammer. But this story doesn't end here, because we found 3 more victims of similar supply chain attacks 1 week after discovery of ASUS case. And all these companies, they were from the gaming industry. And all of them were affected by same backdoor, but this backdoor was different from the one used in ASUS case. But there are some similarities as well. First of all, algorithm used to calculate API function hashes. It distantly reminds the one used in ASUS case. And secondly, our behavior engine identified that ASUS case and other cases were one of the only cases when ePHP DLL was loaded and used from within shellcode, embedded into a portable executable file. And now Mr. Vitaly will tell us more about it.
Thank you. Thank you, Boris. Hey, I'm Vitaly. Well, as you know, my colleagues in Moscow stepped on the tail of ShadowHammer in the end of January. As for me, my story of dealing with ShadowHammer started 2 months before that. Who could have thought? While my colleagues were surrounded with snow, I am based in Singapore, and in December, where I first stepped on the tail of ShadowHammer, I was still waiting for the first snow to come. We don't have that much snow here in Singapore, so I was actually in my hammock, relaxing, drinking my daily essential coconut juice, when an email arrived. And the email said that there is a partner of a company that asked us to look at some sophisticated sample. This is where my story began. I looked at this, I said, okay, I'm gonna describe this very quickly, who controls it, how it works, gonna do the job in half an hour, and I go back to my hammock. But no, it was just the beginning. For me, it was an unknown actor with a very, very sophisticated malware sample. I spent a day on this, didn't crack. Spent another day, it didn't crack. I spent a week, it didn't crack. So I unpacked layer after layer after layer after layer, And then I thought like there must be something very, very important that they hide there. And then I stepped on the layer which was dependent on the hardware that would not unpack and execute on any other machine if it's not the victim, not the target. So I kept unpacking and unpacking and cracking the keys and getting inside and inside. And in the end, it was just a loader of something generic from the internet. So it was the dead end. The command and control using Google Docs to exchange the information with the malware was not active for a couple of months when I completed that. But it was all down. There was no context, no other samples. It was all gone. So I kind of put it in the box. And this box was opened somewhere in the end of January, beginning of February, with a name. We recognized plugins that were used by Shadowpad as the code inside of the deep depths of that initial sample. And of course, we found many others. So now this chart shows the connections between 3 different tracks and campaigns. So it becomes just sophisticated, where we are and how they are connected. So the main story about the ASUS is called ShadowHammer. Here, these guys compromised the distributives of the ASUS Live Update tool. An updater was patched with untampered digital signature. The others are related. So the Shadowpad was linked to this, and I'll show you how they are connected. Maybe this sounds convincing. Other than just the code similarity, which is not very reliable, there are things like they use the same techniques. They compromise supply chains, software supply chains. They make the malware inserted into digitally signed binaries. And the same code and same techniques were used to compromise Korean Larin company. This is where the name Shadowpad appeared. The CCleaner incident that happened 2017 was also the attack by the same guys. So the connections here, you can see that in CCleaner case, according to Avast, they published a blog post last year showing that in CCleaner case, ASUS was specifically targeted. They targeted some of the big companies in Asia, and that blog post from Avast shows that they went after ASUS. Also, there was interesting case in that one of the breached gaming companies, which are additional victims that also released compromised digitally signed binaries, they were using the products of Larin. So it is just a coincidence yet, but then the command and control center in 2 cases were pointing to the same IP range located in the Korean educational network belonging to the same university. Well, we reported this, but it's still, we're still figuring out how this university is related. Probably got compromised service. Now, think about what you did before Christmas. You prepare with families for the celebration. You probably did if you are from the Western countries. But here in Singapore, in the East, basically, there is a much bigger celebration of the Lunar New Year. Now, imagine my role in the beginning of February, when the incident was uncovered with the ASUS, when I had to call people on Friday, get in touch with the company, and they expected, some greetings for the coming Chinese New Year or Lunar New Year. Instead, we reported a big problem. So here I have to thank the colleagues from IT team of ASUS who responded very fast. They reacted and took it very serious. They provided us with additional information to verify that at least current executables are not breached. And all other executables that they pulled from their servers throughout 2018, 2 days after, were also not breached, which was a good sign. We could at least take a break and look back into this problem again. But we kept communication with them and updating them and briefing them on the new discoveries. We are still happy to work further and prevent such attacks in the future if we cooperate closer. Now, speaking of the arsenal of these guys, I just wanted to highlight 3 things, starting from a very basic rudimentary backdoor. And this is, it doesn't show the skills of these guys. It shows that they are really sly, because during the initial reconnaissance, they use very simple backdoor, disposable one, that they can easily replace. So it was like very, very simple HTTP-based backdoor. They were somehow careful about profiling Windows, starting from Windows 95. I'm not sure what's the interest into that, but they carefully listed all the versions, starting from this. So notice that they actually here in this initial reconnaissance started collecting MAC addresses. And these samples are from the Shadowpad track. ShadowHammer, that some people may think that it's not directly connected, actually reuse these MAC addresses, right, to profile, to profile their targets and deliver next stage malware only to specific machines. They also collected serial number of drive C for later use in this main backdoor. And now you can see the sample that I dealt with. The diagram on the right, I'm sure it's unreadable, but it just shows the number of items and the elements that you need to pull together to create a sample. And those are not functions. Those are independent components that have to work nicely with each other, interact like a factory. So they have multiple plugins there. They have VM Protect on top of everything. So it took some time, yes. And in the middle, there is dependency on the drive C serial number, which is used as the source data for encryption key, decryption key basically for the next stage payloads. So it definitely delays you a lot. You need to break a crypto in order to analyze it. And then it's stuffed with a lot of anti-reversing and anti-debugging tricks. Last but not the least, this interesting implant for the servers was very unusual because it is capable of listening on the port 80, which is normally used for the HTTP web servers, but it does it through Windows API that is not commonly used, so that it looks that the backdoor process itself does not open port 80. Instead, system opens port 80 for this, and on behalf of the system, it can communicate with the other hosts. So it is very hard to find for system administrators, I can tell you. We actually made an exercise for forensic analysts to teach how to do this. I tell you, it's not easy at all. And that's why the backdoor like this will remain unnoticed for a very, very long time. We did some scan on the IP ranges and found companies that have web servers that respond to a specific URL schema used in this backdoor. So far, we have identified 3 additional businesses, not the gaming industry, compromised in South Korea right now. One of them is a pharmaceutical company, another is the holding conglomerate, big company. One more is actually the video game company. Now, if you think that ASUS story was big, you probably all read about this in the news. If you look at the other track, the additional victims where they moved, seems like they moved there after the ASUS, working there for months. They started moving to small companies, but to a larger number. According to our detection, that is what we see in our statistics, we have seen more than 92,000 of hosts that detected compromised digitally signed binaries from gaming vendors. So the real picture actually can be multiplied by 10 or 20, depends how modest you are. But I can tell you that we are talking about hundreds of thousands of potential victims. And here the difference is that they did not target any specific MACs. They wanted everybody. So they were much more careful with ASUS, probably just to stay below the radar. Now, we also analyzed and compared the way they injected code into the ASUS binary and also into the gaming industry binaries, and they were different. What surprised us is that in ASUS case, they patched existing binary, they modified the binary from 2015, old one, and then they re-signed this with a valid signature. In gaming industry cases, they somehow seamlessly integrated malware into the code. It looks like the developer had evil intent. It was part of the code. This is how it looks like. They did this in a way that was based on the compromised development environment. And this is where we see a big threat for the future. Because now they are not just targeting software and trying to create digitally signed malware. They are hunting software engineers. And I'm sure that pretty much every big company has some internal software at some point. You have your own developers. They may come after your developers. And Backdoor, they are compilers. So what we managed to find in one of the cases of the gaming companies, that the compiler, the linker was Backdoor, and it would insert malware every time the source code was compiled. So what does it mean? When your compiler lies to you, it's a big deal, because your code will always contain Backdoor, regardless of what source you are trying to compile. It smoothly gets a digital signature because you do not expect maybe like safe process since compilation to secure delivery to the sign-in server. The injection looks like the developer created this. And if you try to review the code, you will not find anything. If you try to make a test dummy project and compile and see whether there is a backdoor, you will not find the backdoor. It's not there, because it was added in this short gap between the source code stage and the existing executable stage. Now, if you're a software developer, you should definitely ask yourself, where does your development software come from? Do you trust it? Was it delivered in secure fashion to your place? And when was the last time that you verified the integrity of this software? And speaking of integrity and the whole trust model we are using, I think we are living in a very interesting times now. Well, first of all, people stopped calling malware malware. Now we call it implants. I heard also that hacking private companies or compromising private companies is not called hacking or compromising anymore. It is called cyber maneuvering through civilian infrastructure. That's true. I mean, I met people from the government that use this term. Well, what can I say? Last word. We have an exclusive. It's a recording of a conversation between the operators that were part of this attack. And I'm happy to present it to you.
Oh, yuck. Still someone's hair and blood all over this. Guys, can you clean up the weapons once you've finished your fight? Disgusting slobs.
Oh, Thor. Want to use a big wooden fork?
No.
Yeah, not really useful unless you're fighting off 3 vampires that were huddled together.
No, I really wish I had my hammer.
Hammer?
Quite unique. It was made from this special metal from the heart of a dying star. And when I spun it really, really fast, it gave me the ability to fly.
You rode a hammer.
No, I didn't ride the hammer.
The hammer rode you on your back.
No. I used to spin it really fast, and it would pull me off the...
Oh my God, the hammer pulled you off.
The ground. It would pull me off the ground up into the air, and I would fly. And every time I threw it, it would always come back to me.
Sounds like you had a pretty special and intimate relationship with this hammer, and that losing it was almost comparable to losing a loved one.
It's a nice way of putting it.
Woo!
What's that?
You know, I asked for the hammer of Thor, and this is what they gave me.
Gentlemen, thank you very much for this presentation. Give an applause to Costin, Vitaly, and Boris. Thank you.